Good evening and welcome to a special edition of BronxTalk with the primary set for Tuesday, June 24th. As part of BronxNet's ongoing commitment to voter literacy, we're hosting interviews and debates with candidates who are running for office. Tonight we focus on the race for the Democratic nomination in the 12th City Council District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Co-op City, Pelham Gardens, Allerton, Williamsbridge, Olinville, Eastchester, Edenwald, Basechester, Wakefield, Woodlawn, and Pelham Bay Park. The challenger in this two-person competition is a former council member of the 12th CD who worked as a New York City child protective caseworker and is the founder and CEO of the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk. It's always nice to see Andy King. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
So you served in the city council. You were forced out of office. We know that happened. Why did you decide that this is a good time to run again?
Well, whether I was walking down the street or at the grocery store or just at the gas station or the cleaners, in the schools, just moving throughout the neighborhood, people say, we really missed the work that you were doing. We missed your voice. We missed the camaraderie that the district had under your service. So with the request of the folks in the 12th district, inspired me and kept talking to me about how do we get you back on the ballot? Can you run
said,
again?
Gee, what else can I do?
Yeah. So at that point, I sat with my wife and my family and some friends, and we said, okay, if y'all want to do this, let's do it. So we went out and got the signatures and made the ballot to give people the option to vote.
And here you are.
Yeah.
Do you have new perspective about being a council member after the experience the last time, or how do you view that past? And then we'll move on and talk about the current day.
Right. Well, I believe the work that we did was a blueprint of consistency. And I was always taught if you stay consistent in doing your work, a lot of people tend not to bother you because you're doing the right thing. Aside from any other distractions, what I had to manage, I just looked to, if the people elect me back into office, to continue to do what I'm a Jesus-serving guy, fearing guy, and just do the work, and just continue to stay focused on helping residents in the 12th district.
You recalled, and we talked about it as soon as you walked in this studio, we once had Truman High School students when you were a council member asking
Yes.
you questions, and it was kind of a fun show, an interesting show, but it reinforces you've been a champion of youth in your district as the founder and, as we mentioned, the CEO of the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program. What inspired you to start the program, and why do you see that as, I'm going to guess, a central part of what your work is about?
Well, I go back to my dad, who was a community servant himself, and under his tutelage saved about 1,000 young men in the 70s and 80s and the 90s. They say the apple don't fall far from the tree, so I guess, I have the same name as him, so I guess the same spirit of service is flowing through me. So when we started the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, but prior to that, we had a basketball league. And out of that basketball league, it's called UDC, the Uptown Developers Coalition, was one of the top basketball programs in the 90s and the 2000s. And then as we closed its doors, I started the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, just being able to get into community work. And at that moment in time, Fernando Ferreira was running for mayor, and I was his North Bronx lead. And as his North Bronx lead, I had these kids, had about 60 kids every after school. I would bring these kids together. Every time he would come to the North Bronx, he was like the Pied Piper. And then, of course, we know Mayor Bloomberg became the mayor. And out of that, the kids said, what do we do next? And out of that was born the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program to keep these young people actively engaged.
It's been successful. It's been
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And what's the most successful thing about it? Then we're going to move on to other issues.
I think the most successful thing is that the majority of the students that have come through the program have not gotten in trouble with the law. They have relationships with the law. Some of them are police officers. Some work with the mayor's office. Some are teachers, some educators. Some have their own families, even had their own kids in the program. I think the success is the longevity and watching young people be able to grow up and be productive. And that's the whole goal of it. Our slogan is building mind, body, and the community.
And you've seen people in the 20 years grow up and become, and then ultimately, you want to give us an example of a youngster that you know, for example?
Well, for example, I have a young man by the name of Brian Melford.
I know Brian.
Yeah, Brian joined the program at 15 years of
Really?
age.
How interesting.
And he's been a part of everything we're doing. He was the president of the Bronx Youth Empowerment at one point. After graduating from John Jay, I brought him on my staff as a city council.
That's how I got to know him.
Yeah, and then from there, after we was out of office, now he currently works for the mayor's office. So he's consistently been doing the work and serving, and people love him and know him. And so he's just one of the good examples. Not to mention we have some people who are assistant principals in schools and run their own CBOs right now. So that's the delight.
You talked about crime. Let's talk about crime a little bit. Overall crime index this month fell for the 7th consecutive month. Always good news. 3% decrease compared to the same month last year. Some specific crimes showed a decrease: robbery, burglary, and grand larceny. What needs to be done that isn't being done, that hasn't been done? Because we want no crime.
Right.
And what are your concerns about what goes on in the 12th district?
I think the biggest thing that we have to stop is how guns get in the hands of teens. I work with teens a lot and helping them understand anytime that there's a conflict resolution that you have to deal with is not grabbing a weapon or getting physical. We have to take a broader approach with our cure violence organizations along with NYPD and those at a higher level to stop that pipeline of making sure guns don't get into the hands of our teens. And then helping our young men, more importantly, have that education with them about them really embracing their own existence. Because when you really love yourself, you're not so really looking to hurt someone else. And we got to get our young men to understand, even our sisters to understand that our children, they got to be better to themselves, but it starts with the parent. And I'll end with this. If a child breaks his leg in the street, they call the parent. If the child throws a brick and it breaks someone, they call the parent. If a child has a gun and kills somebody, parents should be held accountable as well. We need parents to pay more attention to their children, what they're doing, and not come in after the day and say, not my child.
That's an interesting perspective. I haven't heard that before in an official capacity, but that's very interesting. What do you see as the relationship between cops and kids? I'm going to take a guess that you're not one to say, let's say defund the police or anything like that, because we need to have strong police officers and respect them. What's the relationship now? And there's always been tension in that part of the Bronx. I mean, I remember I did a forum there many years ago, but I remember there's always tension up there. What's your perspective?
First, for the record, when I was in the council, I was against defunding the police. I think it's irresponsible to hold up a whole budget process on a slogan and then people don't even recognize what that really means, defunding the police. Secondly, I always say to folks, when stuff goes left and right, after you call on Jesus, you dial at 911. All right, so let's not get confused.
Now that's an interesting perspective.
Let's not get confused. I have friends who are officers, family members who have been officers, and when I was in the council, one of the things we built under, at that time, Inspector Rule Stevenson, the 47th precinct was really safe. We had a great relationship with the community. I started something with the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program called Connections, where NYPD officers would sit down with young people in the North Bronx. We would do it at Richard Green Middle School, and those children who went through that program sat down. When they would see the officers in the street, it was never any problems. If the officer saw me, there was a friendly hello, not trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? And if the officers were to ask you, hey, don't stand here right now. The response was like, thank you, officer. And they'll just comply. Those who don't, they got to puff up their chest and say, this is America, this is free, I should be able to do what I want. No, let's be smart and be safe about it. We have to have a relationship with our police officers because we do need them. And they are our families as well.
Let's talk about housing, and the word housing is not a standalone because everybody wants to talk about affordable housing. How do you recommend the city add the number of affordable units that it desperately needs without destroying, in your community, there are many single family and two family homes and houses. Somebody sells a home, and all of a sudden you got an 8-story building, and it may be market rate housing and those kinds of things. How do we build affordable housing that works in context with communities like yours?
There's a lot of moving pieces when we start talking about affordable housing and what's really true and genuine in the term affordable housing. I think it's just a word that's used and people use as campaign slogans and don't understand when you say affordable houses, are you really for affordable housing? For who? Is it for those who live there? Is it for your influx of new people you want to bring into a neighborhood? As you mentioned, 12th District was ranked number 1 in private homes in the borough of the Bronx. That means you have to make sure you keep the aesthetic look of a district. You can't just change it around. when I was in office, and I keep continuing to have this conversation, if housing and homelessness is not an issue in the 12th district, don't import people from someplace else and then all of a sudden say there's a housing crisis. You created a crisis because there wasn't a housing crisis. And we need to make sure, if we're talking about affordable housing, then we need to make sure it's based on the people's income. Unfortunately, the city has done a horrible job in inflating rents that landlords do not want to take the person who's working, who cannot afford $3,000 for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. It's absurd to charge somebody $3,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment. But if DHS and other agencies are paying it, the problem is when that funding runs out for that resident, what happens to that resident then? Because they can't pay $4,000 a month, and now they're back in the system again. So the city has to do better and think smart about how they do affordable housing. And I'll end with this. One of the things when they talk about housing, we act like owning your home is not housing. Why can't we create where people can have home ownership, especially when you have a home ownership district, instead of tearing down a 2-family house that once had 10 people, now you got 35 people in the same space. We got to think better how housing should roll itself out in the city of New York.
You know, the Metro North stops are going to certainly help the people in the East Bronx, and that comes along with a development plan. Are you satisfied with what you saw about not only the Metro North stops coming to Co-op City, et cetera, but also the development that's going to come with it?
Anytime you're building that can help improve a neighborhood and a community, it's a great thing. But we don't want to gentrify neighborhoods. And when you start gentrifying neighborhoods, you got to put certain things in place. You know, whether it's transportation or new type of food deliveries, is things that the neighborhood would actually need. And if you're building take example, the train, it's great if people in Co-op City have access to get on that, but let's be mindful that we don't want people coming from all over, parking their cars around people's houses, taking a break to get on a train, because then now you create another issue for the residents who live there.
If you had been a council member when the city of Yes came up for a vote, would you have supported it?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
For some of the reasons that you've just talked about.
Yeah.
You've been a big supporter of senior citizens, so if you would assess the quality of life for senior citizens in your district, how do you see that?
I love my seniors. Actually, before we got
we all love our senior citizens. Let's be clear.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people are elected and they're in a position, or even some of the people doing the work at certain agencies, they forget that one day they could be 70 and 80. And you got to really make sure that you protect that person that's relying on your services. I literally just left the senior center before I got here. We were dancing it up and having a good time, and make sure that our seniors have a good quality of life. It means that they're able to be fed, they're able to get around. But when you have a safe community, seniors are not worried about having to be out after 6 o'clock. You know, they shouldn't be locking themselves in because a community or a neighborhood is not safe. And I'll end with this. I proposed when I was in the council before, and the people select me again, I'm going to revisit it, a Centurion bill. And what that was, anybody who was over the age of 80, who was retired, who was in the system, that they need never, ever to come back and do recertification. Only thing you should know.
Recertification
for services.
For services.
You know, so what ended up happening, we had a 94-year-old, her name was Mama Sarah Terra. Everybody loved her. God rest her soul. She missed a recertification and they canceled her services. From Medicaid to health. I'm like, wait a minute, because she didn't make a recertification? As that 35-year-old who was doing the caseworker, you were supposed to go and make sure she was okay.
I was going to say, you're asking an 80-year-old woman to...
94 at that point.
94.
To come down to a city office. Yeah, I'm like, come on. So that bill would require that the city, if all you need to do is just to verify that a person is still at that address, and that's your job, not them to come to you. Because at that age, your salary is not increasing. And if a $1 or $2 that you get because there's a bump in something, it's not going to change the quality of your income. And the city has made some bad choices. If someone's income level can go over to of $1, then they will say, well, you're not qualified anymore. I'm like, let's be a little more humane in the decision making that we're doing these days.
You know, it really makes a ton of sense. I wasn't aware that they needed to recertify,
Yeah.
but it certainly, because you can't say to them, gee, remember the days when you used to use computers and log in? And, we'll just give you a moment now. You can take a minute you can address the audience and explain why you think people should reconsider Andy King as a council member.
Well, first I want to thank you, Gary, but
Sure.
to all the voters in the 12th district. I sit here this evening at the request of the voters and the residents of the 12th district. I have a proven track record of service. I have a proven track record of caring. I have a proven track record of showing up. If you ever need me, I'm always there. I'm dedicated. And for most of us who have a spiritual connection, whether that spiritual connection is, for me, is Jesus Christ. And I take that energy that he placed in me and I thank him every day to put it on me to go out and do what I can to help improve somebody's lives. Sometimes at the detriment of my own essence, but that's what it is when it's about service. So I just ask anyone, if you're looking for somebody who is going to stand up for you when things are wrong and provide services when you need something, and if you need somebody who's always there, if you need somebody who's going to tell you the truth, if you're going to somebody who's going to say, how do we bring unity back to our neighborhood and our community, then I'm your candidate. Nothing else shouldn't even matter, because we need to make sure our children have great education opportunities. And education is just not in the classroom, but it goes beyond into their development. When it comes to our senior community, making sure that they feel safe and they have all the tools that they need to enjoy their golden years. And when we're talking about economics, when everybody's economics are okay, no one's trying to take from the next person. These are some of the top things I want to work on with cleanliness, because many of you who do know the White Plains area, the cookie cutter approach that they took when I was in the council, something called Operation Cleaner Streets. And we want to make sure that you have a clean community, a safe community, an educational and informed community, then we have a happy community.
Thank you so much, Andy King. We appreciate you being with us. And of course, good luck the rest of the way in the campaign. And we'll see you around town one way or the other. And folks, that does conclude tonight's program. The early voting period, we'll remind you, is Saturday, June 14th through Sunday, June 22nd. Primary is Tuesday, June 24th. Make sure you vote. We thank all the people who work on our program. Our great producer, Rebecca Hemick. Our director is Will Guzman. Urelis Encarnacion on graphics. Ian Neville on audio. The editor is Yessi Diaz. We have a cast of thousands, including Marty, in the studio with us. And of course to you too, and he agrees with me, it's the people of the Bronx that are important. So if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, yes, we'll be back next week. Good night.